But feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions.
So Ian, do you want to go ahead and share the PowerPoint?
Oh yeah, let me do that. Give me a second while I pull it up here.
So as Ian's pulling up our PowerPoint, I just want to say good morning and what a wonderful outpouring of interest. And I am very, very humbled by so many of you coming on for this first workshop. And so thank you. Thank you. Let me start there, because one of the big goals of this collaborative project was to get a lot of feedback. And I think we're going to get that today. So that's great. Oh, that's interesting. It's in the top corner. I don't know what's going on here. Okay, there we go. You doing presenters mode there, Ian? Perfect. Thank you. So Ian's going to drive for today, but we've divided up our little introduction, and I get the pleasure of starting off. So we're here today to talk about the near future and the realistic probability that some of the species, the non-native and potentially native transplant species that currently are in the Southeast and the Midwest, including the Great Lakes, could make their way into the Northeast and pose as potentially being invasive. And so this project was a collaborative idea amongst two USGS centers, the Wetland Aquatic Research Center with myself and Ian, and we're going to have everybody go around and introduce themselves, and along with the Fort Collins Science Center with Catherine Jonovich and Pingo Ingolstad. So Ian, can you go to our next slide? So here's the general agenda. Right after this, after one more slide with this, we're going to do introductions. So we'll go around the phone, and if you could just tell everybody your name and your agency, and maybe just very briefly why you're interested. And then I'm going to go into an overview of the project, a high level, why we're here and what we're trying to accomplish. And then we get into the actual feedback part. We're going to talk about the proposed species list, things that are in the Southeast and Midwest and that we're interested in. We want to get some feedback. And then we want to go an overview of the landscape variables, those variables that we're going to use to try to model habitat suitability. And then open it up at the end for any questions and discussions. And we have quite a bit of time. We do not have to use the whole 2 hours, but if we do, that's great, because that's what we're here for. Throughout the presentation, you're going to see lots of photos. These are all the species that we've identified so far that we're concerned about. So you can kind of start getting a view of some of these southern and Midwestern species. And we're not suggesting they're not in any portion of the Northeast, as we'll get into more details about that very soon. All right, next slide, Ian. So why are you here? Well, we want to develop these realistic future scenarios of the expansion of southern and western aquatic species into the Northeast, into water bodies. And part of that is looking towards you, to our stakeholders and users, and getting feedback of what are those priority species that you really want to look at. What are you concerned about on the horizon? What do you see your neighbors' jurisdictions dealing with that you're worried about yourself? And so that's why we brought you here. We want feedback on that species list. We're looking for 100 species. And now there's some criteria about what species we can use, but we'll get into that. The second part is data sources, you know, both biological and natural. What data do you suggest? We have a long list of things that we think are appropriate, but you might have some ideas also. So we're opening the floor to that feedback. So let me stop there for a second, and let's go around and do some introductions. And I'm going to start, and then we'll do the team. And I'm just going to open up my persons, and then I'll go down after the research team presents. So I'm Wesley Daniel. I'm a supervisory fisheries biologist at the Wetland Aquatic Research Center in Gainesville, Florida. Ian?
Yeah, I'm Ian Fingston, also in Gainesville, Florida, for the USGS Non-Indigenous Aquatic Species Database, the botanist there.
Catherine?
Everyone, I'm Catherine Jarnovich. I'm a research ecologist at the USGS Fort Collins Science Center.
Peter.
Morning, everybody. I'm Peter Engelstead. I'm a research associate at Colorado State University up in Fort Collins, Colorado.
All right, and now we'll just go around the phone. So we'll start with Christopher.
Hi, Chris Abel. I'm the coordinator for the Pennsylvania Invasive Species Council.
Thank you. Maureen.
Hi, I'm Maureen Begocious, and I'm just an observer today interested in hearing about this subject.
Thank you for joining. Becky Finn.
Hi, I'm Becky Finn. I'm the environmental coordinator for the Wampanoag tribe of Gay-headed Quina.
Thank you. Joseph.
Good morning, everyone. Joseph Belinsky. I'm a research scientist with NJDEP, Division of Science and Research, and I'm just curious to hear what everyone's working on.
Thank you. Denise.
Hi, I'm Denise Blanchette. I work with the Maine Department of Environmental Protection, and I'm here because we in Maine have limited invasive aquatic species, and we're always interested in what might be coming up north.
Thank you. Gregory.
Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Bugby. I'm a scientist at the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station. I lead the Invasive Aquatic Plant Program and the newly formed Office of Aquatic Invasive Species. And unlike Maine, we have a potpourri of invasive aquatic species.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, hello. I'm Jeff Butensky. I'm with EPA Region 1. I'm generally interested in this topic overall, but also one of my many hats is that I am the Tribal Adaptation Coordinator for the New England tribes, and a big topic is food sovereignty. So this fits right in with that. So thank you.
Thank you. Carrie.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Carrie Brown Lima, and I'm the director of the New York Invasive Species Research Institute at Cornell University. And I'm also a co-founder of the Northeast Regional Invasive Species and Climate Change Management Network. We've been looking at this topic a lot, but more focused on terrestrial species, terrestrial plant species. And so this is a great topic that we really need information on, and I'm really excited about this project, so I'm glad to be involved.
Thank you. Andre. I'm sorry, it's Andrea. I apologize.
Hi, I'm Andrea Coates with EPA Region 2. Just listening in. I work with the nations in Region 2.
Thank you. David. It just says David Guest. Okay, so David's having some technical issues. No problem, David. Thank you for joining. William.
Yep, this is Will Farmer. I am the acting director of the Northeast Climate Adaptation Science Center at the USGS and in DOI. And I recognize a lot of the names from the projects we work with here, and it's definitely a topic that's important for us. So I wanted to jump on and listen a bit. Thanks, Wes.
Thank you. Appreciate you joining. Sean.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Sean Gimbel. I work with the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission. It might be a little bit odd because I work in the policy and planning world, not necessarily coming from the biology side of things. However, I have been accused of thinking like a scientist or an engineer on many, many occasions. So I'm not the normal policy analyst.
Thanks for joining. Heidi.
Hi, I'm Heidi Heim. I'm a biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's prevention program based in the Northeast region.
Thanks for joining, Heidi.
Yep.
Jay.
Hi, I'm Jay Killian. I work with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, and I'm a member of the Mid-Atlantic Panel and the Maryland Invasive Species Council. I'm very interested in this topic. We've completed recently some risk assessments for various species of concern in Maryland, and a couple of them, water hyacinth and water lettuce being the two that jump to mind, are on the cusp of being invasive to Maryland. And so, I'm interested in this whole topic because soon, perhaps those species can survive in Maryland, though they don't seem to survive at this point in time. So I'm very interested in this very topic for sure.
Well, thank you, Jay. Yeah, that's exactly why we're here. So, Kimberly.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Jensen with the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation Aquatic Invasive Species Program. And I'm interested in this because it's aquatics, and I was also part of the Northeast Risk Network panel. Thank you for having this.
Thank you for joining. Catherine Johnson.
Hi, I am Kathy Johnson. I am the regional coastal ecologist for the National Park Service Northeast region, and I'm just interested to learn about what's going on here and share it with the parks across the region.
Thank you. Julie.
Hi, everybody. It's Julie Lockwood. I'm at Rutgers University. I'm interested in invasion science, research, and policy, and a member of the Mid-Atlantic panel, and also interested in the crossover between climate change and invasive species.
Karen.
Hi, I'm Karen Terwilliger. I work with Terwilliger Consulting Incorporated. We are conservation planners and scientists who serve the state fish and wildlife agencies, among other really important conservation clients. Most recently, we have worked with the Northeast, over 200 taxonomic experts to identify regional species of greatest conservation need. Right now, we have a draft list of 380. We just finished the Midwest. They have about 304. And we previously worked with the Southeast 15 states, and they have 600, actually 900 total regional species of greatest conservation need. And guess what one of the most important threats was to many of the aquatic taxonomic groups? Invasives. So I'm here to hopefully learn and pass along information both ways, because each region, this Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, state fish and wildlife agencies, have databases and regional species of greatest conservation lists and supportive data that are available to you and all partners.
Thank you. Christina Lipsky.
Hi, I'm Christine Lipsky, and I'm with the National Park Service in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I'm a marine ecologist, but I'm also the rep to the Northeast panel for the Park Service. And so I kind of wear a couple of different hats in that respect. And like Kathy said earlier, it's basically, we just want to know what's coming down the pike so we can, work with the parks to hopefully, prevent new species from coming in and, do the best that we can to just help preserve those resources.
Thank you. Dawn.
Good morning, folks. Donald McLean, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the branch of aquatic invasive species in headquarters. Been working on aquatic invasive species issues for about 22 years. I'm currently starting to take part in the Northeast Regional Horizon Scan that's going on, and I'm in Maryland, and we already have too many invasives, and I don't want any more.
Thanks for joining, Dawn. Mark. Do we miss Sandra? I will come back to Sandra. I apologize. Mark. I can't see your full name.
Mark, you're on mute.
Yeah,
Mark
you're on
Lewandowski.
mute, Mark Lewandowski.
Okay, sorry about that. Mark Lewandowski, Maryland DNR. I'm represent the Chesapeake Bay region to the Aquatic Nuisance Species Task Force, and I do aquatic plant control here in Maryland.
Thank you. Sandra, I'm sorry I skipped over you. Go ahead, Sandra.
No worries. So I'm Sandy Kepner. I'm with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and I'm the Aquatic Invasive Species Coordinator for the Northeast region.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep up with the names. More keep getting added, so it like shifts on me. Amy,
No
Amy
worries.
Martin. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Amy Martin. I'm the manager of Wildlife Information and Environmental Services at the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources. And one of my responsibilities is to serve as the agency's invasive species coordinator. So I am here to learn and stay engaged and meet with you guys on this topic. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Catherine McGlynn.
Good morning. This is Kathy McGlynn. I'm the AIS coordinator for New York State's DEC, and my main responsibility is to help implement the AIS management plan, which focuses on prevention and early detection.
Thank you. So this one has McKnight from. So I don't have your first name.
Sorry about that. It's McKnight.
Oh, that's
from-
there. Okay.
What I put up there. My name is Jonathan McKnight. Good morning. I'm with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources Wildlife Service. And I'm here because I think it's really great that someone is doing this work, which is fascinating to me. And I'm also, frankly, pretty excited about the team you guys have pulled together to do this. So well done. And I'm looking forward to today.
Thank you. I appreciate all that energy too. That's wonderful this early in the morning. John.
I am John McFedrin with the Maine Department of Environmental Protection Invasive Aquatic Species Program, and I am here for the same reason that Denise expressed earlier. So I will just leave it at that. Thank you. Thanks for organizing this.
Our pleasure. Meg.
Good morning, everyone. Meg Modley, Aquatic Invasive Species Management Coordinator with the Lake Champlain Basin Program. All things are important to us here, so this is wonderful, and this is a great group, and it's so nice to see so many faces I haven't seen in a long time.
Thanks, Meg. Mike Bolin.
Mike Boland with the Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Nation Natural Resources Department.
Mike, I'm going to butcher your last name. You're going to forgive me. Mike Viscelli.
Nope, you got it right. Mike Viscelli, I'm with the Army Corps of Engineers, North Atlantic Division. I'm the Natural Resources Management Program Manager for our area. We have a whole bunch of projects throughout the Northeast, so we obviously have a vested interest in invasive and impacts on our projects. So thank you.
Thanks, Mike. So the next one's MLT at Nature Source, maybe?
That's
yeah,
me.
Nature Source.
Is that the way I come through?
Oh, Michelle, it's you. Yes, that's you.
Me. Michelle Tremblay. I am the contractor to the Northeast Aquatic Nuisance Species Panel, among other water-related things in my unpaid life, and I am grateful that you've put this together and very excited about what comes next.
Thank you, Michelle. Matt Nielsen.
Hey, I'm Matt Nielsen with the USGS. I work with Wes and Ian on the NAS database program.
Susan.
Hello, everyone. Susan Pascoe. I work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and serve as the Executive Secretary for the Aquatic Nuisance Species Task Force. So happy to be here. Always interested to hear what USGS is up to. So thanks.
Thank you, Susan. Olin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Olin Reed. I'm an aquatic invasive species technician for the Vermont DEC. I've got a general interest in aquatic invasive species, and I'm excited to learn something today.
Thank you, Olin. Chris Reilly.
Hi, Chris Riley with the Maine Department of Environmental Protection with John and Denise. I'm heading up the courtesy boat inspection program. So I get to see where they're showing up with plant fragments and looking at that data.
Thank you, Chris.
Sure thing.
Roberta.
Hi, did you say Roberta?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Roberta Hill. Up until a month ago, I was with Lake Stewards of Maine, working with John and Denise and Chris as their Director of Invasive Aquatic Species Programming. And we primarily focused on the early detection piece, and we have trained thousands of volunteers across the state to screen lakes for the presence of aquatic invaders. And now I have made a crossover kind of to the climate change world and the interface, and I'll be working with community resilience partnerships. It's a program here in Maine to help communities get ready for climate change, and taking care of the water resources is a huge part of that. So I'm really interested in how these two very big threats are going to interface and how everything is going to change as a result of that. So, very interested in this. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining. Matthew Shank.
Good morning. I'm Matt Shank from the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. I've been involved in several invasive species research projects in the past. I'm a member of the Mid-Atlantic panel. Very interested on understanding the ecology of invasives and how it affects management. Thanks for organizing.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Saraki. I am the Invasive Animals Program Coordinator for the National Park Service, and I am interested in developing new tools that help us to more proactively manage invasive species.
Thank you, Jen. Amy.
Hey, all. Good morning. Amy Smagula with the Department of Environmental Services in New Hampshire. I'm a limnologist, and I coordinate the exotic species program for the state, mostly dealing with aquatic invasive plants, but I do outreach and education for invasive aquatic animals as well. We are currently dealing with 82 infested lakes and 11 infested rivers, and I'm just curious to see what's coming our way.
Thank you, Amy. Christopher. It's Christopher Smith.
Hi, this is Chris Smith with New Jersey Fish and Wildlife. I'm a fisheries biologist and one of the New Jersey representatives on the Mid-Atlantic panel.
Thank you. Michelle.
Good morning, everyone. Michelle Stoudinger, Science Coordinator for the Northeast Climate Adaptation Science Center. My interests are primarily in coastal and marine invaders, but I'm really curious to see how we're approaching aquatic invaders across the board. So glad to be here.
Thank you. Jim.
Jim Straub, I think it's this Jim, right?
Yes, you're correct.
All right, sorry. Yeah, Jim Straub, Department of Conservation and Recreation for Massachusetts. I run the Lakes and Ponds program for our state parks. Also manage the aquatic invasive species management plan for the state. And I definitely want to know what you guys are bringing to my state and dropping off and running away. So.
All right, Jim. We'll let you know.
Thank you.
Yeah. Tierna Smith.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Tiernan Smith. I'm with the St. Regis Mohawk tribe up in northern New York, and I'm the Water Resources Program Manager.
Thank you. Jesse.
Hi, I'm a technician for the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation's Aquatic Invasive Species Program, and I'm just excited to learn more about what's coming this way, like everybody else.
Thank you, Jesse. Catherine.
Good morning. This is Kate Wyman-Grotham. I'm with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in the Midwest region working on aquatic invasive species prevention. And I have to jump to another call in just a couple of minutes, so I'm looking forward to catching up later with the rest of the project.
Well, thank you for the time you gave us, and that was, I felt like it was never going to get through it because the list kept growing, so that was wonderful. So let's jump in this so we can get a little bit before Kate has to jump.
Was there anyone that didn't get to introduce themselves that might have joined?
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Ian. Yeah, was anybody else that joined late? Yes.
Maybe we got lucky.
Okay.
Thank
If not, they can introduce themselves at the end. It's okay. All right, throw it back up there. Let's keep going. All right, go ahead to the next slide. Perfect. So I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but we're here because we're trying to keep all of our management actions on that circled area on this invasion curve. Our project is hoping to guide future monitoring within the Northeast region. And this will hopefully help control new populations potentially, help educate and bring awareness of both areas and species that could be of high risk. And with that, keep our costs and impacts low. That's the goal here, is to bring awareness. Because, next slide, please. There's a lot coming this way as you show. And this is a big part of the national EDR framework. And I'm tickled that Don was on this because he's been a wonderful champion of this framework. The Department of Interior with USGS and Fish and Wildlife Service are really focused on providing information and tools and actionable resources to aid early detection and rapid response. Our project fits well into this framework. So if you look towards, you're welcome, Don. If you look towards the target analysis, that is what we're trying to aid on. We're trying to bring awareness to what species are already here in the US. These are hypotheticals. They're here. And where they can move and if they can be super problematic. We're even going to provide some information on how they will potentially move. And so that should aid not only on thinking where we need to look, target analysis, but bring awareness. If you do find something, you should already have the information in hand if it's a problem or not, so that you don't have to have that delay in thinking, is this a risky new introduction? Do I need to be concerned? That's the goal. That's the goal. Next slide, please. And like I said, there's lots of non-native and invasive species on the fringes. And so in the Midwest, and so we use the CASC region here and the Southeast CASC region here, you can see the totals counts of aquatic non-indigenous species. And when looking at both of those regions and comparing to Northeast, there's about 300 plus species that are in those regions, not in the Northeast yet. Now that doesn't really count for the species that are on the fringe, because I'm gonna be honest, I'm from Kentucky, born and raised. I never really considered as part of the Northeast. And so there's quite a few species in Kentucky and Virginia that we didn't really count that number that could still move up too. And so we'll touch on that when we're thinking about what species we want to focus on. So there's a bunch of potential movers. Next slide, please. And here are a few already that you can see moving north. So the first example are black carp, a Asian molluscivore. They're potentially very problematic for our native unionid mussels. Brought over here for biocontrol, were accidentally released, and now we have both, you know, a diploid population and triploid populations in the wild. But what you can see here is that pathway. So coming up the Ohio River is the black carp, and then we had that jump, and that jump was a landowner, somebody who owned pay lakes, that brought the black carp to their pay lakes. So that's the kind of jumps that we're concerned about. Second example, alligator weed. Look at the spread across the Southeast, all over Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and now you see it creeps. It's creeping up. It's moving further north. So these are the things that we're concerned about and want to bring awareness to. Next slide, please. So what are the pathways? Well, when we're saying aquatic, you might think, well, there's not a lot of natural pathways, and you're not wrong, right? So they can come up the Ohio River. They can go through the Great Lakes chain over to Lake Champlain. They could potentially skirt up estuarians on freshwater lenses, kind of doing a little stepping stone up the Atlantic coast. But there's a lot of human-mediated pathways that will potentially move them here quicker. We have the whole issues with potential hitchhiking on trailers and boats. We have water potentially moving around. And even if there's not active movement at this moment, we see issues in the Southwest. And we know that at some point, the value of water is going to rise so high that there's going to be interest in moving water around more frequently. We have our game species that have the potential to be moved around, either purposely as new opportunities or illegal stocking, so they can make their own fishing opportunities. And then the aquarium trade, as a lot of the exotics that we're going to show you that are established in Florida and other places are in the aquarium trade, and they can move that same route. Next slide, please. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Catherine Jarnovich, and she's going to go through an overview of how we're going to approach this project.
Thanks, Wes. So this graphic here just gives kind of a high level overview of the analysis path we plan to take. So we plan to use aggregated occurrence data for the species that we select starting today, and pair those with hydroclimatic data and other predictors to develop models to predict habitat suitability under current conditions. And then we hope to engage all of you again that are familiar with some of these species and help us review these models and decide whether or not they look, how they look, if they look good or not, and revise those. And once we've come up with kind of final revised models, apply those to future climate data. And so with these models, we'll be able to produce maps of both current habitat suitability and future habitat suitability. And then we can use other information, such as the pathways information that Wes was talking about, to develop species risk scores. And then we will provide all this information through some sort of interactive web application. So the image shown here is for the Inhabit web tool, which is for terrestrial plant species, but it's one that's been co-developed with management agencies to deliver these types of models. And then all of this will be integrated into the USGS NAS database to provide kind of a one-stop location where people can go and look at, current distribution of these species and then where they might be in the future. Next slide. So for a lot of this, we plan to use hydrologic units, probably at the 12-digit HUC shown at the bottom of the screen there. And we'll pull these from the National Hydrography Dataset Plus version 2. And we'll end up using these HUCs to apply terrestrial predictors to water bodies, such as if we want to use something like the percent of cropland in a watershed as a predictor, we would aggregate that information at this level to use in the models. And then we'll also likely use these 12-digit HUCs to deliver summarized information for these species. So to give you an example of what this might look like, next slide. The products we hope to get from this will be this expert listed list of priority invasive species that we're starting to work on today. We'll also produce these pathway risk analysis scores for each species. We'll have digital maps of potential current and future habitat suitability, and then future risk scores for each target invasive species. Next slide. Here's an example of what one of these products might look like. This is an example for terrestrial invasive plants from another project funded by the Northeast CAS that I'm involved with. But here, for example, the map on the left shows the number of modeled plant species with habitat suitability under current climate at each pixel in the map. And then similar for future climate, so you can see how the numbers of species with climate suitability might change over time. So many show distributions northward. Next slide. And then we could also look at these at an individual species level, where you could see, for example, where there might be decreasing suitability for a species, maintained suitability, increasing suitability, or where it's always predicted to be unsuitable. And this type of information could be useful for developing things like watch lists. Next slide. And so here's another example where we could summarize this information to, say, HUC 12 units and rank species based on, the amount of the HUC that's being looked at that's suitable for each species. So you could get an idea of what species might be most problematic within a HUC. Looking at distance to currently known occurrences and pair that information with pathways to get at likelihood of it showing up in that HUC, and also looking at the change in suitability from current climate to future climate. Next slide. And here I'm going to pass it on to Ian to talk about the species list that we're hoping to create today.
All right, thank you, Catherine. Yeah, so hopefully you all received a link. If not, I think Peter can put the link in the chat if he hasn't already, for a live spreadsheet that has the current list. I think we're a little over 70 species of freshwater non-native species that we've compiled so far. This is by no means a static list or set in stone. We are kind of working on our way through this list to get to our 100, knowing that we weren't expecting to have 100 ready for you today, so we could get some feedback and any additions that you might have. But we do have a criteria that we're trying to use for selection of the species that we want to analyze to get to this 100. And the 100 it's somewhat arbitrary. As when we were writing the grant, we came up with a number that seemed appropriate and what seemed feasible to do within the time frame as well. So hopefully we can get it. We're not going to get something like double that, but we're hopeful that we'll be able to prioritize based off of this selection criteria and your input as well. But ideally, we want to focus on the species that are priority to our stakeholders, that they are concerned with, and then also focus on ones that maybe they don't know that are on the horizon, that may not have entered into their states yet, or their territories or regions, and they may have that concern. And so I think that's sort of the benefit of having us all here to discuss that at various levels and scales. So the other aspect that we want to focus on is that these are non-native species to the region. So that could include some native transplants, so species that might be native to the Midwest or to the Southeast United States, but then expanding their range due to climate change and anthropogenic movement of these species into the Northeast, based off of various things that might be occurring in the not too distant future. The other criteria we have is freshwater species, like I mentioned, but particularly plants, fishes, and invertebrates. So we've left out potential movement on land by things like reptiles and amphibians. But I think we can see where our list is at and see if there is a lot of concern for certain species that would be moving on land to new areas. But we're trying to focus on, and I think we could probably get a good list from those three taxonomic groups. And invertebrates a very large group in itself too. The other criteria as well is due to the data limitations and being able to model these species. We would need to have at least 100 occurrence records at individual scales that would show a adequate distribution of the species habitat range. So that wouldn't mean like 50 occurrences in one lake and another 50 in another lake, but across the spread of the species' current distribution within the United States, we would need an adequate number to sample from to build these models, to input into the models. So that's so that does leave out a few of some of the more recent introductions that haven't quite spread as much to reach that number. But we can see if we're running to the point where we're trying to we want to accommodate everyone's needs. So we'll see if it gets to that point where we need to sort of lower that limitation. But let me go into I think that's, yeah. So the Excel list here that I shared with everybody, and I'll just pull that up so we can all kind of have a look and see what's on there. And I'm going to have to, I think, stop sharing, and then I'll share the sheet here. All right. So yeah, I see a number of you have already clicked on this link, and you can see, if you're seeing what I'm seeing here, the spreadsheet to this live document. And this is the list so far that we have. And if you scroll through it, you can see the number of 76 species sorted by taxonomic group here in column C. So you have the fishes, the invertebrates, and the plants. And so those are kind of general, because there's some algal species that are in the plants as well. but just to kind of simplify that, and there's not too many that we lumped it in that grouping. But then then alphabetically you'll see by the scientific name, and then we also included the common name, and then the native status, either native transplant, meaning it's native to some portion of the United States, versus exotic, where it's completely non-native to the continental United States. And then the other limitation I forgot to mention also, because I keep mentioning United States, is that we don't have a way to model with consistency outside of the United States due to the data limitations there. So we can't model into Canada, unfortunately. And then the same thing with into the marine habitats. But the basic information, hopefully, that you would need for identifying these species are in these 4 columns. And so the instructions for how to provide your input and feedback are going to be on this first tab called Instructions. So if you look at this one here, it kind of gives you the 2 basic steps of you can upvote a species that you want to include, or that you feel is a high priority. And so that would be going back to this proposed species list, and you would change the number here. And we've locked these other columns, these 4 columns here, so that you can't change these purposely or by accident. But you can change the comments field and the upvotes. So if and we want to try to get 1 vote per person per species that you feel you want to prioritize. So if I'm interested in white catfish, I would change this 0 to a 1, and say if bowfin already had a 2 and I'm interested in that, I would change that to a 3. So we're kind of, we're expecting the, just your own understanding and honesty with changing these votes, but try not to, if you do make a mistake, you can always undo the mistake or change it back. It's just, it's a live document, and you'll see a number of people working on it. So also maybe if there's another guest already on the same cell and they're changing it, wait till they finish changing it maybe, and before you change it, because there may be some complications there with changing the numbers at the same time. Same with the comments as well. So if someone's in one of the comment fields, go to the next comment field. So you should be able to see kind of this purplish highlight when someone else is on a field. So those are the 2 areas where you can add upvotes and comments. And then we also have another tab here where you're suggesting more species. So this is, again, fitting that criteria that we mentioned. You would go to the suggested species tab here, and if there's something that's not on the list, or if it even is on the list and you just, you feel like, it needs, you really want to, incorporate it in your feedback as well, it's fine. It'll count as an upvote for that species already on the list. But this is where you would be able to add all that information, the common name, the taxonomic group, and who recommended it. So don't worry about if there's some duplicates on here or not. We'll sort this out throughout the process, and we're hoping to have this this finalized by the end of the year, and so by January, which means we would like to have all the feedback, not today, but we're thinking about like within a month of from now is have sort of this list finalized, and we can return back in January with the final list and all the feedback from all the individuals participating today. And also feel free, if there's individuals that couldn't make the call, they're also welcome to provide their feedback and any additional species that they may be concerned with. So were there any questions on this process that we have going on right now? Or even, I'd entertain, any comments, current feedback, even with the process we have now as well.
Kimberly Jensen has her hand up.
Oh, sorry. To go back to
You're
this
fine.
one here. Yeah, Kim.
I was wondering, hey, Ian, I was wondering, I noticed that Amy put her prohibited list in the chat box. Would you like us all to do that, to put all of our prohibited lists, to make sure that all those species are in this list, or Like, how would you like us to add our state's prohibited lists?
I think that's, I mean, if it's a link, I didn't see it here. Oh yeah, it's a link. So that's probably fine because I can go through that. Ideally, we would want to put it into the spreadsheet. If a species isn't mentioned on here on our spreadsheet in the first proposed species tab, we could add it to the suggest a species tab. I want
Ian,
yeah.
we can have students go through their list. So if the states want to provide those, just because I'm sure they have it in a nice document, we can have a student worker go through and fill this out for them. And
Yeah,
then
that's fine
maybe
too. Yeah.
you can come back afterwards and uptick the highest priority ones, because that'll help us if we go over 100, kind of pick which ones are most important to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And one thing I did want to stress as well that it's a little more nebulous because obviously we're talking about an uncertain future, is we're trying to focus on species that are not established in high numbers currently in the Northeast. And the range we showed is a large range, obviously from Kentucky and Virginia all the way up to Maine. So you know, with even within portions of this Northeast Cask region, we want to consider, you know, certain taxa that are established well outside of that region, and may have some, you know, movement already and establishment already within the Northeast region that we specified, but maybe not as high of density, high abundance as in the neighboring regions in the Midwest and the Southeast, if that makes sense. So we want to prioritize not specifically the species that are already in high abundance in the Northeast that we are already concerned with and that you're already dealing with, but the ones that we should be watching coming on the horizon in the next 50 or so years.
Ian, Becky Finn also has her hand.
Oh, thank you. I keep having to go back and see. Go ahead, Becky.
Some of us don't have access to the chat in Teams. Teams gets funky with folks, or at least it always does with me. So anything that's shared in the chats, could we also get things emailed?
Yes, you're welcome to email it. And we have the very last slide, which we'll end with, has all of our contact information. And you're welcome to send it to anybody on the team, or if you're most comfortable with Ian, you know, we'll all respond. So emails will be great.
Yeah, and if I could, I've noticed this about Teams too. Today's my lucky day, 2 meetings in a row with Teams, and I'm able to chat and do other things. But whenever I close it down, I am able to save the chat as a TXT document. So maybe you could email that to us, and then we can benefit from all of what is transpired. I don't know who that goes to, but it would be helpful, I think, even those of us who can see it, to be able to save it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. That is my intention of with recording this and recording the transcription of the audio, is that also I'll send the chat as well.
There's some questions in the chat too, I think.
Yeah. Let me start here at the beginning. I saw, Michelle, you had whether there's be a distinction between the species of concern versus what is here in the Northeast from the South and the West. Yeah, so that's kind of what I was mentioning earlier, I think, is that we are looking at, it's sort of a question of density and abundance within the Northeast compared to the other regions. and a lot of that is it's somewhat subjective and your own assessment, but we've been going through a process of looking at the actual numbers as well. And one of the original spreadsheets I sent out in an email, it had some of those raw numbers, but I wouldn't try to focus too much on the actual numbers, but it's, you know, I really want, we're trying to focus really on where your concern is, where your priority is, and we can figure out together you know, if we need to prioritize certain species over others as well. So
Yeah.
on you know, not just specifically that criteria.
Oh, no, and you know, I'm sorry if I missed it. You know how people say the same thing different ways and then, you know, your brain goes dead. So sorry about that. The reason why I brought it up was, you know, maybe there's a role for the NEANS panel as a starting point just for our part of the Northeast to be able to put our lists together and say, okay, you know, here are the commonalities, let's put those in. And then for the others, you know, is it knocking at the door? You know, how close is it? Maybe it's a way that we can prioritize what goes in, and then it's a justification for the entire Northeast, which shockingly does include Kentucky West. So I always said if grits are on the menu, it is not the Northeast, but evidently things have changed. So I would like to find a way for the panel to maybe help with this, and maybe the Mid-Atlantic and the Southeast can do the same, because I think that, you know, in New England and New York, and we could also reach out to the provinces too, because they're represented on the panel. We could see if, you know, there's something that appears on 2 lists, 5 lists, you know, 7 lists or more. And then we could look at, you know, here's what people are watching. So I didn't know if that would help with prioritization. I will stop rambling. Thank you.
No, all good. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, these are all things we need to consider. And you know, being that that's the scope that we're doing this, and the scope that we typically work on is at a national level or multi-regional level. It does limit our expertise from, you know, from our perspective compared to your more direct local and regional expertise, folks that are working intimately with these species already or within your region already. So that's really why we want to get your feedback too. Dawn, I see your question. I posted the link in the chat again, so hopefully that works. I sent an email out on Tuesday morning with some clarifications in the link, and hopefully everyone got that. I apologize if it didn't go out well. And I think there was some confusion about the meeting links, and but hopefully, yeah, I see enough people joined on, so hopefully it worked out. And then if there's other questions you had, Don, on the spreadsheet instructions, let me know.
No, I just was making sure it got emailed, because as the old guy in the room, sometimes I can't seem to find the chats again when I'm looking for a link. There's just too many dang places to look for stuff now, and I find it easier in email. That's all.
I got you. Yeah, well, I'll send it another email.
So Ian, even though it's kind of going out of order, maybe we should talk about, because it seems like everybody's really interested in participating, about our quarterly meetings and how people can be more involved. So.
Okay.
So let's go out of order just for a second, because there's a lot of interest right now on that. So do you want to jump back to the PowerPoint and we can show that?
Yeah, let me get back to that. Thank you.
So don't worry, we'll come back to the landscape data. Let's jump to what they can do, and then we'll come back to variables. Yeah.
This one here? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so we have our next steps working with everyone responding to the species list, hopefully by November 18th. So we can finalize it by the end of the year. We do want to have quarterly updates with everyone here, all the stakeholders and everyone that couldn't make the call that are still interested. So I volunteered to be the point of contact for this, what we're calling the community of practice, but basically sort of our workshop group that we have here going on. And so this is going to be, every quarter, every 3 months, we want to have just an update, let you know how the process is going. Welcome you all to join us again on a call. It doesn't have to be a lengthy 2-hour call. It can be, we'll figure out a good appropriate time And then this is for the length of the project until we have a substantial results to show everyone, and then work towards finalizing a good output that everyone feels comfortable with. And then if you have any data to share as well, or any questions about the modeling aspect, as far as data, what we mean is, information about areas of concern or climate-related data on forecasts, different environmental aspects about the modeling process, you can direct those questions to Peter Engelstead.
And biological data. If you've got
And biological data, thank you. Yeah.
If you're not giving it to Nash yet, it's always a good time. So.
Oh yeah, that's true. So yeah, I think the next quarterly meeting we're hoping to have in January to showcase the final list. Is there anything else you wanted to say about that, Wes? I'm not sure.
No, it just seemed there was a lot of interest in how to continue to participate in. And Michelle, we plan to send out through the Northeast CASC, the Climate Adaptation Science Center newsletter, a link so people could comment on this, and we'll do the same for the task force. So for the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic, we'll be happy to share this. Again, at the end of the day, we want to make sure we're getting good feedback from all our users and stakeholders, and so they could help us pick the species of the highest priority. We're very open. I'm happy to model any of the species, so I have no dog in that hunt. So let's, Ian, jump back to the landscape data, and then we can open it up for discussions.
Okay. Yeah, this was the next part. So the potential data sources, this was including the habitat predictors, such as the projections of future climate, future human population and land use, land cover. And these are what are going to be used to parameterize these models, kind of like, tying in the life history of some of these species, the known pathways, along with environmental aspects. And the trick is, of course, we can get this stuff now, but we need to have a way to forecast that into the future. Like I said, about 50 years into the future. And some of these are already there based off of temperature, precipitation. And so, there's factors of, what can be modeled accurately and what has some uncertainty. But we are trying to focus again on the aquatic aspect, hydrologically, considering what may be impacting these species and their ability to establish, not just move there into the Northeast, but also establish in the next 50 years. So we do welcome any suggestions for US-wide landscape data, especially with consideration for the projections into the future, if you know of any. This is not only an ask for species occurrences in your region that we may be lacking, but any potential access to publicly available landscape data. Here is an example of some of the variables, these predictors that we have for current land use, current climate, and current hydrology. And so is a substantially larger list right now than the future, but you can see it considers various types of habitats, various types of climate measurements, and hydrology measurements as well, looking at stream flow and stream direction, size of the water bodies. So this is fairly accessible already, and then tying this into the future, land use cover, future climate, trying to match these variables as well to what we have currently so we can accurately model into the future is the key. So we do have a few land use cover variables like future grassland, future forest, mixed forest, pasture, and also future climate variables that are commonly used already. And then, like I said, that we hope to have these next quarterly meetings in January, and that's pretty much it, really. I think we want to use the rest of this time to field any questions, have discussions, and provide you, with hopefully some answers that we can today. And these are all our contacts information. So Wes and I are in Gainesville, Florida, and Catherine, Peter, and Grace are in Fort Collins, Colorado. So just to give you an idea of the time difference here.
And quick question, if I might, to the team. First of all, thanks again. The other is that I had mentioned that this could be a wonderful model for marine species.
Michelle, you went to mute for some reason.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I just wanted to thank everyone again, and I did want to ask, even though it's in the offing, when this model is tested and it goes well, and I know that it will, is there a possibility with USGS's mission and its ability to service marine issues, if we might be able to do the same for marine, because there's a lot going on there, and I think it would be helpful for a region to be able to do the same.
Catherine, do you want to address that, or would you like me?
Why don't you go ahead? I was trying to answer a question in the chat, so.
Okay, fair enough.
Track as well.
So, Michelle, the limitation on the marine environment is the availability of these continuous variables to use for them. And so, although I think there's a lot of interest in that type of research, we would need to look towards what would be available and how well the current models that Catherine and Peter are utilizing would work in those systems. It's obviously a very different system than inland waters and then the terrestrial work that Catherine is an expert on. So I'm going to say, as a placeholder, maybe this is something that could be considered into the future. I don't know if we have the perfect design for the marine environment, but it is something that we should not forget about and come back to in the future with potentially some additional experts.
Meg, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just looking at some of those factors that were for the climate change, and I don't know if you want to go back a few slides, but I was just curious. I mean, I feel like we're looking more at, and I appreciate Greg's comment, like I think water chemistry would play a role here, as well as possible salinity impacts to water quality for matching here, and less so land use, land cover types of factors, considering these are all aquatic. So just thinking more about climate change variables that could impact matches for these species in water. And I think that, the wetland piece is really important, as are probably some, I know we're not coastal and lakes, but sort of the mapping of ecologically rich areas are likely going to be the places where we're going to see better matches for some of these future species. So I'm just looking at some of these factors and thinking about what might have the most weight for aquatics.
Go ahead, Catherine.
Does anyone know of future predictions for water chemistry? That's one thing that we have those listed on the current predictors, but being able to find that kind of information predicted into the future makes it tricky, I think, to include in these models, even though we realize that it's something that is definitely important.
Well, the ice and the snow melt or snow, for example, or like freeze over data, it's been challenging to find, but we are seeing large water bodies freeze over less frequently in the Northeast than they have in the past, and predicting what that might look like into the future, just with looking at temperature, air temperature and water temperature increases over time are probably would have a little bit more of an impact there for these species.
And ice over days is definitely a variable I've used in the past when I was in the at Michigan. So I know that's available. We could have the nutrients is a very interesting question, Meg. And I like Catherine, if anybody is aware of anyone working with that kind of projections, that would be very informative.
I just wonder what the Gleon folks might have there, because they collect a lot of water quality data, and they might be able to do some projections into the future. I don't know, Carrie or others from NIS. I don't know how to say it exactly right. What else you guys might have for water body temperature increase information. And water chemistry pieces. Like we can see trends. We see trends in salinity. We see trends that I think would impact these species.
So Meg, if you would like to maybe send an email just with that information, I'd be happy to follow up and see what's available. Like, again, that'd be a very interesting variable to model with for future scenarios. I would love to have that variable. I think that'd be good. Now for the saltwater intrusion, I do know of course models where they show potential just locations of projected salinity range. Nothing to my knowledge fine scale, but again, there could be some that I'm just not aware of. So we could also consider that.
Well, we have some salt studies in the Northeast that are just showing from road salt, we're seeing increases in salinity in freshwater systems from our road salt application.
Well, see, yeah. There's the marine application right there.
Kim, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to say that calcium certainly seems to be one indicator of whether we see a species or not, particularly the mollusk species, but also it affects the plants too, and pH, calcium and pH. I don't really know of any studies other than, specific to those species.
I also saw that this is going to include riparian species as well. Is that right?
So Catherine kind of tried to make a clarification on that. Do you want to explain that, Catherine?
Yeah, so for this project, we'll be focusing on true aquatic species, just because the suite of predictors that we would use for aquatics versus others is quite different. We do have another project in Habit that's focused on terrestrial plants, and that does include a lot of terrestrial species. And then the example slides that I showed as well for the terrestrial plants that included the climate change piece, those include some riparian species as well. So a different project, but those are being covered.
If folks are not familiar with the Inhabit work that Catherine's group does, it's wonderful. Maybe you can drop a link, Catherine. Because
way ahead of US.
Oh, Peter's already on it. Thank you, Peter. It is wonderful work, and some of us fish heads don't know as much about the terrestrial folks and their great work.
I was going to point out there's a question in the chat from Denise about range expansion.
Okay, this is actually a good one, Denise. I'm glad you asked that. We've actually gone back and forth on this. So there are different ways of looking at range expansion, and I'm going to give you mine, and it's a little biased because I do run a non-Indigenous database. I feel that in this day and age, there's very little true range expansion. It's all through human mediation. And let me clarify. It's through habitat alteration, through new connections like canals or piping. It's through degradation. It's through, you know, opening up niches by over exploitation or degradation. So in my mind, any expansion into areas outside of what was considered native before human colonization is potentially non-native. So not everybody agrees with me. I do understand that. So for the sake of this study, we've kind of agreed that we would consider those natural expansion, things that aren't people picking up by the bucket and dumping them somewhere new. It's still potentially fair game for modeling. But this is where your thoughts could be very, very valuable. If you don't care about shadow bass or green sunfish moving further north, or, you know, those kind of native species in other regions, you could downtick those or just make comments that these are lesser priority than others.
Yeah, one in particular, Ludwigia peploides is I see that creeping quite a bit up north, and so I think there's not a well-known native range for that species, but that might cause some complications or some disagreements. Number of plants, by the way, yeah.
So Sean's asking about turtles. We're trying to maybe avoid doing any reptiles or amphibians because of the potential to move across terrestrial areas to new water bodies. So it becomes a little more challenging on both the pathways but we'll keep it in our back pocket. I'm making no promises, but we really think the focus, I think we can get a good number, 100 species of fish, plants, and invertebrates. I do know crayfish can crawl across land. I do understand that, but they're smaller home ranges than mini turtles. So I have a question for the group. I don't see any more hands right now. Are there any established species in the region, maybe in one part or the Northeast, that are a major concern that we didn't list? And that's assuming you've had a chance to really look through our list.
Tiernan, you had a question?
Not a question so much as a comment. One of the species that we have here that's becoming quite a bit more of a concern. I'm not sure if it's on the list. I haven't really seen all the way through it yet, but Eurasian tench is becoming quite an issue up here. Many of you are probably not familiar with the St. Lawrence River system and the way the Great Lakes chain works, but it comes down through Canada, and there's several dam systems and lock systems to get into the Great Lakes. And what we are finding is that the origin of this invasion coming from Quebec area is potentially being stopped by one of the dams, and well, the Moses Saunders dam system, as well as the Eisenhower Snell locks in the Seaway, is seemingly preventing the spread of them upstream at this point. But as anybody's familiar with it knows, that's very simply just a matter of time till one decides to travel through with a ship or whatever the case might be. And then once it's upstream of that location, I mean, it is fair game for the entire rest of the Great Lakes at that point. So I saw someone in chat that they are having them in Lake Champlain. Makes sense. That's actually really close to the documented release area. Well, I shouldn't say release area, but escape area, I guess maybe is more appropriate. But yeah, I mean, we're finding them here regularly. We have native fishermen that are catching them regularly, and reporting them. We're coordinating with Environment Climate Change Canada as well as their researchers in the area, and you guys at USGS and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as well. So, something that we've been on task with quite a bit over the last couple of years, and it's unfortunately the reality is, I'm sure that no matter how hard we try to stop this from spreading upstream, it's not going to work. That's my major concern, because I feel like they're going to be a pretty voracious habitat destroyer is what it looks like.
I think that's a wonderful suggestion, and one of my favorite scientific names, Tinka Tinka. So we could definitely add to the list. If it wasn't there, we could double check. Amy has her hand up.
Yeah, I'm becoming a little bit more concerned about Hautonia palustris, or the water violet. We first found it in New Hampshire in 2020, and this year we found it in our third water body in a location that I believe is mostly due to waterfowl spread of the plant. So I think that one could be a big regional issue. It spreads rapidly by vegetative growth. I've seen fragments drifting around water bodies. And the big problem I'm seeing is a lot of amphibious growth, where it is growing on mud mats adjacent to surface waters. So management from an herbicide perspective may be difficult unless those areas are accounted for. So I think it could be a regional issue in the near future. I believe there's a spot in Maine with it, and then 3 now in New Hampshire, and that's in a major river system, 3 major lake systems that flow into major river systems.
Yeah, Amy, that's unfortunate to hear that it's still spreading there. I considered that one as well, and unfortunately it falls in that category of having sparse occurrences throughout the United States. But I think maybe we'll add it. We can, definitely consider it on the list as well if we need to consider, add some more species. But there's a number of those, like water wheel, as well as there's not much known about the habitat suitability in the United States yet. But that might be one that we can, try to consider if there's enough available data on its current extent.
Sure. I just also wanted to put it on people's radar too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that also kind of, that maybe brings up a point about specificity to taxa and if they have generic relatives, so something in the same genus that might have similar life history. So again, that might be something we have to discuss and consider based off of the priority of the species. But thank you for bringing that up. And please send me that record if you want it on NAS.
Yeah, definitely do that.
So Don McLean is also suggesting, and I'm pretty sure this is on there, Luigia grandiflora. We have Luigia on there, correct? Yes. And he says he's 90% sure they have in urban lakes in Columbia, Maryland. And how extensive is that to other parts of the Northeast? So that's a good suggestion, and I'm pretty sure we've got 4 species of Luigia on the list.
Yeah, I think you're right.
He's the botanist. I have to ask him. So
yeah, that one falls in the complex, the grandiflora hexapetal. Oh gosh, and it's misspelled. I guess the font's just different. It's that grandiflora hexapetala complex. We've split it into 2, but they share habitat in the southeast, and see it slowly spreading. Maybe not spreading as rapidly as Peploides, but Peruviana is another one that's fairly riparian wetland species that probably do just as well in a little drier habitat. But we're seeing that spreading out of Florida fairly quickly. Relatively quickly.
I put quagga on there. That's on me. David Wong, you have your hand up.
Hey, good morning, Wes. Just go back to your question with regard to species not in your list. One of the species in Massachusetts is the swollen bladewort, Utricularia inflator. It's first documented in 1990, but now there are multiple sightings in Massachusetts already. One of the challenges is that, it's not invasive in Florida, let's say, in Georgia, but it is invasive in, let's say, in Northeast, like even Northwest, like Washington State. So that another challenging issue is that this species has, is the swollen, the bladewort. There are 4 or 5 native species just in Massachusetts. Sometimes for some folks, very difficult to identify if you are, not working in this field. So the problem is that if they are there, the biomass is just so gigantic. So it's really a problem for boating, swimming, or, just a lot of issues. And especially in southeast Massachusetts, from the Cape to the bottom of the bay, watershed, drainage area, they are so just abundant. But because of other existing native species, that it becomes a problem for a lot of folks. We don't know how many there are. Just like, it's not in your list.
Thank you, David. What do you think about that, Ian?
Yeah, I guess we have a number of species that, well, I'm thinking again of plants, my bias, right? So like water chestnut, it seems to have a range extent. And I think that in the Northeast, and that has to do with a number of reasons, and one being the cold stratification required for its dormancy. And so there may be some species that are more resilient in the Northeast, and so that we need to consider life history characteristics like that. Species that may be escaping the Southeast and finding new habitat in the Northeast, and I guess having sort of this ecological release from sort of the constraints that keep it in check here. That is something to consider, and I'm curious then how we could gather that information and relate it back to some of our variables, or if it's something that's sort of qualitative. But yeah, that is something that I think is worth considering. Mark, did you have your hand
up?
Oh yeah. Thanks, Ian. I had just wanted to give you a heads up. We found Trapobispinosa, up until the last 6 months. It's always been on the Virginia side of the Potomac, and now we found it in 2 spots. One that was a landowner called and asked for help. We sent somebody out, and then my supervisor actually went out with the Natural Resource Police in a helicopter that's usually used for catching poachers. This time of year, there's not much going on. So he actually went out and did a broad search, sort of using that point as a center, and found one more that was visible from the helicopter, but I can guarantee that's probably not the last one. So we haven't put it in the database yet, but my guess is that there will be some more points popping up, expanding into Maryland next year, sadly.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. It's making its way further north into Maryland now from Northeast Virginia. I think it was a matter of time. And yeah, that's a species that seems to be moving via waterfowl pathway, potentially contaminated also on some equipment, but we're not really sure. We don't have any hard evidence of that as much as we do the waterfowl. But that's also one species that I would like to consider on this list, and it's kind of just below the cusp of having enough occurrences at a wide enough scale to model effectively. But that one is a concern, I think, because of the difference even within that genus of the life history strategy. It doesn't seem to, at least according to some of the research that's being done by folks in the Army Corps, Lindy Dodd, that it doesn't require the same cold stratification for germination that Traponatans requires. So that may open up its range a little bit, and it's just a matter of time for that one. But yeah, we'll probably talk about that in the Mid-Atlantic panel, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, make sure you send me that point.
Will do. Thanks.
I just added it to the suggested list just for your notes. That's all.
Thank you. Roberta?
I just wanted to go back to the Utricularia inflata. And David, I think you had mentioned that, especially for the layperson who doesn't do this work a lot, that it is a plant that's, we do have it here in Maine in one, it's quite widespread in one lake that also has two other invaders, Lake Arrowhead in the southern part of the state, and was reported in another lake here in Maine, but has not been seen since it was reported. However, some volunteers that we had trained on Lake Arrowhead, we worked together with them, and they came up with a very good system of differentiating inflata when it's not in flower, which when it's in flower, it's quite easy to distinguish, but when it's not, if you're not trained, it looks a lot like our very, very common Utricularia vulgaris. So if you're interested, David, I've got that information. It might help even some of the people that you might be training in the field for that. I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, thanks a lot. That's very useful. If you have something, just send to my email. My email is david.w.1@mass.gov. So also, yeah.
Put it in the chat so I can.
Okay, I will. Just so you know, like here, not only like the common like blade award, we have like a purple blade award. We also have, like you said, if they have flower, it's easy to tell the difference. But there are like multiple species, like with so many characteristics. It's at least 5 I have seen in the field. Like from my experience. But yes, I think we at least for Massachusetts, I think there are more spots, like especially in lakes. Rivers, only 2 rivers, probably something I saw that. But a lot of folks have no experience. It's just a challenge. I'll send my email to you. Thank you.
Great, and I'm going to put my email in there too, because it looks like maybe some of the rest of you would like that information. So I'll put it in there. Just reach out, and I'll get back to all of you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Roberta.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, did you have another question or comment? Nope. Okay.
Legacy hand.
Came back up. Sean?
Okay, yeah, I mean, kind of for me to go back, and again, I'm the policy guy at the table, probably the only one, but you had mentioned, some of the I guess these critters that are kind of established, but not necessarily throughout the whole range. And the 2 things that came to my mind immediately were flathead catfish. I mean, they're thriving here in the Susquehanna Basin. They're also in at least the Schuylkill Basin within the Delaware Basin. And I guess I mean, it seems like it's a matter of time until they might make their way toward New York. Within those basins, but knowing anglers the way they are, they love to move things around that they want to catch. So that's a scary thing. The other one ties into another point. New Zealand mud snail. From my little that I know, I guess it's in Lake Erie, so that would tag, Pennsylvania, New York. But we're finding it, it's one of those things, if you look for it, and especially if it's tiny, you don't find it unless you look for it. And we're looking for it, and we're finding it all over the Commonwealth. But with the water chemistry caveat that it's like they do really, really well in these cold limestone streams. So, angler waders and gear are definitely moving it, but waterfowl are likely to move it a bit too. But the population seem to really, really, really take off with that water chemistry associated with the limestone streams. So I'm wondering if, even if there aren't projections about, what climate change does to water chemistry and that side, like even if you have the current water chemistry and, maybe even just assume it more or less stays pretty close, you could run with that as the next best alternative. I can just say that I did go out with our AIS coordinator last year to check 3 different streams, and 2 of them were hardcore limestone influenced streams, and I happened to be the first person to find New Zealand mud snail in both of them. The other one wasn't quite the traditional limestone, had a little bit, but not much, and there was nothing there. And they were all within, tribs to the same stream, like A, B, and C. And it seemed to be like a water chemistry driven thing that really has them proliferating. So just throw that out there.
Berta, did you still, you have a legacy hand, or do you still have a
Oh,
comment?
sorry.
It's okay. Meg,
a legacy hand. Yeah, I guess I have a legacy hand. Sorry.
Meg, go ahead.
Yeah, I just see, I see a few that I have questions about. I think like the goby species, for example, aren't super widespread across the Northeast yet, but the climate is a match. Like it's not necessarily because of a climate, it's just they're not here yet. And the other one was, for whatever reason, fish hook water flea are also starting to jump lakes and invade. And I just want to make sure fish hook are covered when we do spiny as well, because we got spiny first, but then we got fish hook, and fish hook way out compete spiny. And the last one is, I don't know how we're going to deal with this new hydrilla strain in the Connecticut River, because it's the only place we know that it occurs in the US so far. And I know Army Corps is working on more genetics for that, but I don't know if we know enough about it yet to be able to say whether or not it could be influenced.
Yeah, I agree with you, Meg. I think that new strain in the Connecticut River, called the Connecticut River strain, is of immediate priority for sure, for certain. I included the dioecious strain from the southeast that seems to be limited by the temperature regime and the climate. So considering that the monoecious strain is already pretty well established in the Northeast.
Agree.
So it does seem, because these are genetically differentiated and they seem to have different responses to their environment, it does seem like there's enough case to make that an argument that we should be treating them separately and not just hydrilla as one taxa, or taxon. So yeah, I guess I appreciate that you put that on there. I'm not sure that we have enough of a spatial extent. I'll have to talk with the group of the entire
that's fine. It's just
Connecticut River to include that. Because yeah, I mean, if it's within that section, it could potentially go to all the Northeast. And just because it's in one part of the Northeast, we are concerned with other parts of the country as well, or the Northeast cask as well. Yeah, I think it's good to include that.
Okay. Thanks.
So just to make sure it's really clear, because you keep hearing us talk about these low occurrence species as being problematic. The work that we're doing is high quality modeling that Peter and Catherine's groups are putting out. The more occurrences, the better off the model will be. It'll be as close to reality as we can get with the more occurrences. So it's not saying that we don't have interest in those low abundant species. It's actually quite opposite. We were really concerned about them, and it'd be great to do some early. But here's a promise I'll make. The team will get together and we're going to review all the suggestions, low abundance or not. And if there's an option for something for us to do to help you, now it may not be that high quality modeling that Peter and Catherine showed you of all those cool bells and whistles. It might be something a little more simplistic, but if it's in our power to assist, we want to do it. So I'm just going to throw that out there. So go ahead and put all those species on there. you know, put a water chestnut on there. But yeah, I don't know about the hydrilla, since, you know, I don't even know how many occurrences we have of that, but put it on there. And then we'll do everything we can to assist, because yeah, these are the ones we want to get early, right? These are the low incipient populations. These are the ones we want to try to knock out before they become 100 occurrences. So Peter, Catherine, do you have any follow-up to that?
No.
No. Okay. So we will definitely discuss all that. So Jay, you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi all. I was just curious about how are you differentiating occurrences, Wes and Ian, from established? Because, you know, when we were doing work and I mentioned not hydrilla, water hyacinth and water lettuce, trying to figure out if it can be, you know, what kind of risk it is to Maryland. Excuse me. There are tons of records north of Maryland, but you know, and some say in the USGS database says failed versus established or unknown. We use the GBIF database from all over the world, and you can't tell what's actually established and living and overwintering at that latitude, and it becomes very difficult to model. You know, ideally, I think we would all model we would model using data from established populations, right? And not just, oh, it's a summertime occurrence in Nova Scotia. You know what I mean? And so I'm wondering how you guys are dealing with that kind of stuff or how you plan to deal with it.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Ian. Yeah.
We always say we get records from, you know, I find records at least from up in Ontario of those species, because they're in the trade. They're popular ornamental plants. And I think that's the same with some of the animals as well. Some of the fishes, you'll get some, you know, stocked fishes that may be ephemeral. They're not going to persist. I would love to conduct a wide study looking experimentally at some of the deposition of the seed and the viability of the seed bank for some of these species like Pistia, like water hyacinth and water lettuce. I think we're going to have to use the surrogate established populations in the Southeast, where we're fairly certain that there is continual regrowth and you know, the population is well suited for the environment here, and discount some of those areas where there is that uncertainty. Yeah, and my apologies too for the concerns with the status on some of the database there, that we have, if some are mentioned in error as like being established in the Northeast.
Yeah, and I think Ian hit it right on. We'll use our best professional judgment on many of these populations, based on our knowledge of their habitat suitability and where they can currently live to judge those. Jay, you hit on a major project that our database is undergoing right now, where we are reconsidering how we assign those statuses, and we're coming up with a whole new way of displaying it into the future, taking it off those individual specimens, because in my mind it should have never been a specimen. Status is a population. You know, you could be alive or dead as an individual, but if you're established, you had to have a population. And so we are re-envisioning that as a new map layer that will display with a decision tree behind it based on individual species, life history, and, you know, there's going to be a lot of, you know, empirical evidence behind those decisions into the future. So as Ian said, if you found any errors, we apologize. This or never fun to find it as you're going through the data. But we do have big visions of reconsidering how we make those judgment calls on what their status is into the future. David.
Just curious, like in the list, talk about Asian clam zebra mussel for biovac. So that must be a reason you don't want to list quagga mussels, right? But my point is that, like, yes, in here in Northeast, mostly still zebra, but like Great Lakes, you know, quagga, they have being like so dominant. We don't have such a large system like Lake Michigan, but still, you know, like I remember I talked with Bill Harmon the other day. He said, well, we really should, you know, prioritize quagga mussels for as the next, you know, biowildlife for potential invasion for some like large lakes. So I'm not sure you must be have a reason that you don't want this quagga mussel. Just curious.
David, do you know that quagga mussel are now in Texas? They made a huge jump down to reservoirs in Texas. So I think we are continuously surprised by the plasticity of some of these invaders, and they ended up in places we wouldn't assume. And it's such a impactful species, David. I would definitely just like to look. Like maybe we do this modeling with quagga, and you could be relieved to see that it's not showing a lot of habitat suitability, but it's very impactful. I think you would agree.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Jay, you still have your hand up, or do you have another question?
No other question.
These are all great comments, by the way. This is exactly why we wanted this group. It's not been disappointing.
I just wanted to remind everyone as they're leaving comments and votes on the spreadsheet, the species list, please provide an upvote in that column E for upvotes for species that you want to prioritize. That way, you know, it's anonymous, but it also helps us kind of quantify the priority that we want to give some of these species as well. So if you can, you know, I would just want to stress that and make sure that that's clear. That's why we have that column for upvotes. And of course, leave any comments that you want to leave as well in the other columns.
So a complete aside, but since we're a room full of mostly invasive species ecologists, anybody coming down to NASBA in a few weeks to Orlando?
I wish, Dan. I wish, Wes. Not.
I'll be down there.
Excellent, excellent.
Who was that? That was Carrie, right?
That was Heidi.
Oh, hi, Heidi.
Yeah, good.
I'd be surprised if Carrie wasn't there.
Jennifer's going to be there. Excellent. I know Peter's going to be there. It's at the Margaritaville Resort. That's enticing.
You guys will have to change your tickets, right?
Yeah, well.
Ooh.
If they're
Fort
gonna
Myers.
play, yeah, if they'll play Jimmy Buffett songs all the time, I'm definitely not going.
I love you, Michelle. Thank you.
I'm there with you, Michelle.
Oh, boom on both of you. We're totally getting off subject now. I'm a parrot head.
What if the incentive is you get to see Wes doing Jimmy Buffett karaoke?
I'm in.
Ooh, I could do that.
I'm
Son of
in.
the Sailor. That is my jam. Okay, back to science. Kimberly.
I would love to go there for that reason too, but I was going to ask about some species that are found around Vermont, but not yet in Vermont, like fanwort. Should I kind of include those in the proposed list? And like they may not be voted on because they're found in other places around the region, but not yet in Vermont. So I just don't know how to handle that particular set of species.
I think you should add it. Absolutely. I think you should add it. And because I'm gonna be honest, as one of the team members, and I think the team will agree, the ones that you persons are putting in as your priorities are gonna trump than our original list. And there might be a couple on that original list that definitely you guys are really excited about and want to up the list. But if you're not worried about some of those, like apple snails or another mystery snail that you don't have any plans to manage, then I'd rather put stuff in there that you guys are actually concerned about.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Wes, I was just going to make a comment, something I was thinking about, hearing a lot of the folks from further up north kind of talk about these trans-border species. I think if there are folks that have like partnerships with our Canadian counterparts, probably be good to get their contact info for kind of including them in these future conversations, whether they're going to actually be part of this particular working group, or at least sharing information across agencies. I think that'd make a lot of sense. So if folks have folks that they're working with already, kind of thinking, I guess probably Ontario, Quebec, that would be great to get contact info for those managers.
So we're getting close to the top of the hour. This has been tremendous, and I'm no way trying to rush anybody off the phone. But if you're happy with what you've heard and need to drop off, we really appreciate your contributions. Expect a follow-up email. We'll send the link again for that fish list. So don't feel bad if you can't find it. I'm going to be honest, Ian. I've been looking, and I'm having a hard time finding it. So we're going to send a clean email outside of the invite to everyone who participated. And so you'll have that list again. We'll make sure we have real clear directions. And then expect another invite for the January meeting. So yeah. And share it. Absolutely. Thank you, Peter. Yes, share it widely with your colleagues and your network. We're open to all interest groups in their feedback for this. And like I said, we'll also put this in the Northeast Cask newsletter. So if you subscribe to them, you'll definitely see it there.
Did we put the link in for the Cask website or the newsletter?
No, but I'm sure we could drop it in there right now.
Unless Peter has it on hand.
And if you're not aware about the Cask and risk networks, well, you should definitely look into them. The risk are regional invasive species and climate change networks, and it's just focused kind of on what we're doing here, trying to get people talking and to collaborate, coordinate our efforts, because big challenges ahead of us. Somebody dropping it. I wasn't doing it. I thought maybe Peter was doing it.
Sorry, you just want me to drop in the
I'm
feedback
sorry.
link again? Okay.
Yeah, you look like you were typing. I thought you were doing it. So
I can certainly get it in
there.
there.
It is.
Okay.
Okay. Last call for questions, comments. And I appreciate all the positive energy we're getting in the chat. Yes.
Just quickly, I am putting somebody in the chat for a potential partner contact. So I didn't know if you'd just be shutting everything down when you, because I haven't quite gotten all the information in there yet.
We're gonna send all this out to Roberta, so don't stress about that. We'll send.
I was going to ask somebody to send to you guys. So
perfect. Yeah, we'll leave it up. The chat does close down when the last person leaves. So
yeah, right. I have a second. Yeah. That's fine.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. Well, I guess the science team will stay on just for a few more minutes, just in case anybody else has anything when they drop in the chat. But we really appreciate everybody's contributions today. This was wonderful, honestly. So great contributions, great discussion.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye all.
I look forward to seeing some of you later this year. In person.
Hey, see you later, Ian. Hopefully I don't have any more bad news for you about Trepa.
Yeah. Was that Mike that was going around in the air in the helicopter? Or did he just leave?
Yes, Mike Naylor.
Yeah. Yeah, he's on our sort of email list we have going. My other side projects.
So hey guys, I know the science people are staying on a little longer. I'm staying on just to annoy you guys. And there's a couple things I wanted to bring up that I didn't want to share with everybody, but I thought were kind of interesting. Number one, it's fascinating to me to see a number of conservation targets from my state on your list. I mean, people were talking about Utricularia inflata. I don't believe that's on your list, but that's actually an S2 species. It's a candidate for conservation protection status in the state of Maryland. The bowfin is a species that we're looking hard at the status of that thing. So it's real interesting how these species could be on the crux of being invasive and that sort of thing. I was also fascinated through this discussion, particularly with Wesley's definition of what nativity truly is, as opposed to what is migration going to be with changing climate and assisted natural migration, that sort of thing. Wesley, we got to have a beer sometime because I'd really love to argue with you about that, as I'm sure many people have in the past. And last thing, promise this is the last. Maybe as the lone sort of wildlife guy on this crew, I can understand why generally nutria are not considered for lists like this. Invertebrates and fishes and plants, and those are the sort of things. Nutria, I've had people tell me that, well, they're not really aquatic in the sense that they don't have gills and that thing. But if a manatee is aquatic, if a dolphin is aquatic, then a nutria is aquatic. I think it would be reasonable to say that nutria, we're going to hold them over, even though they do go into freshwater habitats and will exploit freshwater habitats. I could see keeping it for your estuarine/marine component of this to come in later. So that would all be reasonable. The reason I bring this up to you now is because unlike virtually all of the other species on here, nutria, which are going to move north, which are established in North Carolina and Virginia, so that they're at the very bottom of the range that we're discussing here, they are going to be driven north by warming temperatures, by the lack of those cold snap killing winters. And to a sense, I think they're a classic example for the thing that you're looking for. But what I really think recommends them is, like virtually all the other species on your list, nutria can be controlled and eradicated. They can be stopped in Virginia. Virginia is at a pivotal moment now as to what they're going to do with that species. And it is truly possible to intercept them in Virginia. If Virginia, especially on the federal side, if the federal representatives for Virginia can come up with the wherewithal to do what happened in Maryland and that sort of thing, then they can be stopped, unlike virtually all these other species. So just one for your consideration. Great presentation today. Thank you for listening to me at the end, and really appreciate it. Look forward to the next step here.
I did just put a link in the chat of a paper that I did with some nutria researchers predicting future distributions of nutria. It's a few years old, but we really looked at their kind of biological tolerances for climate. And so there are some predictions in there that might be useful to you, but thanks for your comments.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm very aware of all the good work you've done working on Nutria, and Jacoby and Carter and I Jacoby Carter from Lafayette and I are interested in Nutria and looking at the population growth in Duval County in Florida. So believe me, we did talk Nutria for a short bit, but we're trying to keep us focused. But I appreciate all those comments.
I get it. I get the last thing I would say is that, yeah, we eradicated them in Maryland, but in 10 years or so, they'll be back coming north from Virginia. Again,
Yeah.
Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. Bye now.
Bye, John.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right, debriefing for the team. Grace, thanks for jumping on. I'm sorry I didn't introduce you.
I'm gonna stop
Apologize.
the recording here.
No, it's absolutely not your fault. I'm so